6 minutes in, let's begin. Welcome everybody. This is the Meshery Dev Call. We discuss everything related to Meshery on this particular call once a week. If you're new here, you are very welcome to give a short intro or tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin. Pranav, I believe you are new on this call. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi. So I'm currently, studying my bachelor's in India, and I'm a third year student. And I just joined today, and I'm quite excited to be a part of this community and start contributing. I'll be more active in tomorrow's call, I guess, the newcomers call. So this is just me sitting here and observing how things go. But thank you so much for letting me talk.
That works. Welcome to the community, if I already haven't said that. Moving on, who else is new? Rishabh, I believe you are. If you would, turn on your audio and say a little bit about yourself. Oh, all right. So Rishabh is having audio issues. He'll be communicating in the chat. That's fine. All right. While we wait for him, let's talk about the agenda. If anybody else has anything to add, now would be the perfect time. If not,
So I
let's
just wanted
begin.
to know, I'm really sorry to interrupt you.
Do continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what sort of conversations do you generally have? I know you said everything Meshery, but maybe a little more in detail. Is it like projects that are ongoing, certain, what do you say, PRs that you have to review and accept? Is this where, do they occur here?
Everything that you just said, actually, it could be concerned with peers, it could be concerned with related projects or directly related to the Meshery project, anything that we're currently working on and that which needs some review or which could benefit from some feedback can be discussed in this particular call. Does that answer your question? Perfect. All right. Let's move on. Did Navendu finally make it onto the call? I guess not. I'll try contacting him once back and figuring out what exactly is going wrong. Is Anita on call? Okay, another spiral miss. Um, Lee, would you like to start us off?
Oh yeah, sure. Hey guys. Hey, I have a headache. Not that that really matters, but I'm slightly off this morning, so I just woke up. You're lucky that you see me with my hair brushed. You were saying that Navindu is not on just yet. Is it right? He's having
Yes.
trouble with the link. Okay, fair enough. Good. It is so. There's a lot of things to talk about today. I'm hoping that we talk about a bunch of stuff. I'm hoping that each of you get a chance to say something. Actually, so Pranav had a great question. I'm going to try to type out the answer because a lot of you have heard me give that answer in the past, which means we should probably write it down somewhere. Maybe like on the newcomers page on the layer 5 NG. If anybody's here is working on that. Anirudh and Navendu, and a little bit of Jay Batra. I was hoping some Sladen, but I don't see him on. Are working on Meshery CTL system context. They're working on bringing context to Meshery CTL, and Anirudh isn't on. Will somebody poke him? Maybe 5 of you poke him. He should be on. So then I guess that means that I'm up on this topic, which is we're getting ready for for our next release. It's a minor release, but it's jam packed full of a bunch of architectural changes, new components, like a lot of new components, maybe more than you can count on one hand. So by any other measure, it ain't a minor release, it's a major release, or it qualifies as a major release. We're just not revving the 1.0 yet. We're just not revving the major release because, well, because informally 1.0 signals production readiness, and we're not quite there. There are people who use the performance management aspects of Meshery for production things. That's fine, that area works well. The rest of it is on its way, and it's about halfway on its way, maybe. If it's a little bit hard to measure, but it's about right. Anyway, we want to let the world know that we're about halfway there, and that there's some interesting things that they should be using and trying out and giving us feedback on, helping inform the roadmap on. And there's any number of you on the call who've done quite a bit of work on those various components. Now is a chance to tell everybody about it. And so we want to, if we can, be a bit organized about announcing that, about getting the word out, about writing up what the word is. And so it's a little bit of a task unto its own, just kind of organizing, organizing a release. What does it mean to make a release? There's a number of things to it. There's a lot of soft things, so non-code activities, and there are some code activities. So there's a bit to coordinate. Some of that includes code quality. Some of that includes, code quality, feature functionality, writing up of things, maybe taking some videos of some things, taking some screenshots of some things. It means documentation. It means blog posts, being social with the updates. It means, code coverage. It just means, it means a lot of things. It means then sort of releasing the bits. At this point, hopefully releasing the bits is one of the easier aspects of making a release. Reason being is because there's a lot of time that gets invested into continuous integration for the project and all of its various components. So much effort is given to continuous integration that we've revived a bi-weekly meeting focused just on continuous integration. There's a lot of components that comprise Meshery, and they each take a bit of CI. So it's a bit of a long-winded way of asking, is anyone interested in taking on the release manager hat for the release? So I sort of briefly described some of the activities within there. It's a bit of program management, if you will, a bit of it's sometimes hard to distinguish between project management and program management, but it's a bit of herding cats, corralling animals. It's a bit of going around making sure that we've got docs for each of these features, that we've got a release announcement created, that we've got, the things that I was saying, kind of blog posts that each of the leads for these areas are giving a green light and a thumbs up that these things are functional, that they're working, that maybe that green light isn't just from those one or two individuals that are focused on that component, but we're getting some feedback that we're ready to begin to do betas. So we want to make a couple of early releases in a beta format. So, and we have a particular naming scheme for the way that we version the software created here. It follows semantic versioning. And so in accordance with that, we'll probably have a Meshery v050 beta 1. And depending upon how many bugs we find, we'll probably determine how many betas we have. It may be that we do a beta, I'm getting some it's not likely that we do a beta and find no bugs. It's likely we do a beta, find a number of bugs, maybe we release another one, perhaps. But
Hey, sorry to disturb you, but your screen is not currently shared. I see you typing in the doc, but no one can see that.
thank you, Drew. Thank you. Weird. Is everybody can hear the rooster or no? Well, this isn't it. Damn it. By the way, some of you are going to be on a mailing list soon. We're going to get Nighthawk up and going. That is not the screen I want to share. Wow. Drew, I think you gave me such a jolt, I accidentally quit the other app that I was in, the other browser. All right. Apologies. Thank you for that, Drew. Anybody of what I've described thus far? Anybody? Is anyone raising their hand on taking on that role, the release manager role? And if sometimes I ask questions like this and people are intrigued and interested, and it is entirely and they have some questions that they'd like to ask in private. So I get that. So come ask them and see if you want to try out the activities. I'll try to lay them out a little bit. I'll try to write them down and but to finish off what I was describing is that we'll probably have a release candidate. So maybe like an RC1 and then make a release. Hopefully we would just do sort of minimally these two things, get a beta out there and get an RC1 out there. Now, a whole separate conversation. This is something for us to talk about in the Meshery CI call, which, by the way, I'm going to fully answer Pranav's question, not verbally, non-verbally, but the CI call is a great place to finish up these discussions about how many releases should we do, what the how the stable and edge channels work around how they are vehicles for these. Cool. What else were we? Anybody have any questions on that? Anybody tentatively raising their hand? Intrigued by it? Signal if so. All right, so that's that. Not hearing anyone. Nivendu or Pranav, by the way, just one, thanks for sharing your video. That was great. Two, thanks for speaking up and asking questions. That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to chatting more on tomorrow's call.
We have an event on call.
Oh, nice. All right. Probably backed into Vendu. He's up. Oh, okay. We're saving.
Yeah, I'm here.
Nice. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Share and...
Yeah, I'll just share my screen in a second. Yeah. So the issue I was working on was to make the system reset command context aware. So the earlier behavior was that the reset command automatically picks the latest Docker Compose YAML from GitHub, but actually it should check the current context and the channel and the version attributes, and pick up the Docker Compose file from that particular release. Yeah, so yeah, so I'll just show the code. So what we have done currently is we first pick up the current context, and we will then pick up the channel of that particular context and the version of that particular context. And if the channel is Edge, then we will just pick up the latest Docker Compose file. But if the channel is stable and it has a version, we will pick the Docker Compose file from that particular version in GitHub. And I will just show my config.yaml file. So the current context is here is local and the channel is stable and the version is v420. So if I just run the reset command here, it should get the Docker Compose file from the v0.4.20, and that's what it does. Yeah, I still have to write some error handling here, but yeah, it generally works. Yeah, that's it.
It's amazing how hours of work can be reduced to just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
The Pranav, just to make you feel hopefully very warm and welcome. Same thing with Rishab. Is so Nivendu. How long have you been in the community?
I think I joined somewhere around last November, but mostly I was working on the front end part. Yeah, the websites.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then it was only like a weekish ago that you switched over to look at.
Yeah,
So
kind of a weekish, like 6 days ago, as it says here.
Yeah, and so then you're already presenting on the call, which is pretty awesome because you and I
Yeah.
we just talked about that command like a couple days ago. So it just so it's pretty fantastic because you're going to have your name in the V050 release. Like you're going to have contributed to it. People will use that very feature, especially anyone who's contributing here. That feature is super convenient to being able to, well, reset to factory defaults, so to speak. Like I've used it, I don't know how many times, and it's been a pain in my arse, if I can use that word, in the past, because it was crossing release streams. It was violating, I would be on stable channel, I would go to reset, and it would reset to the Edge releases, version of the Docker Compose. So for my part, I thank you. This is going to be good. But anyway, so I was calling out Rishab and Pranav to say that, like, you have to follow in Nivendu's footsteps. He's making waves already. It's great. Any feedback for Nivendu?
Like some like what all error handling techniques. Like I need to do some like error handling, I think. Yeah, maybe some like specific use cases for this command where this could break. Probably I need to work on that. I think we need some suggestions on that.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've got a few. I'll ask. So Husseina, who's on the call, actually, she's made in the best of ways, she's made a mess of things inside of Meshery CTL. So she's got her name on a fair bit of lines of code in there. And so she might have some ideas. One of the ones that I would try out is what happens if you try to, like, if you try to, you subscribe to the stable channel. Great, that's the channel that you're on. But what happens if you misspell it? Whoops. And then, or what if you're on there and you're subscribed to the stable channel and you're trying to pin to the version V0420,000 for 201, some version that doesn't exist, does that get handled? And so, just fat fingering things like that is always. You also, this gets a little opinionated, and hopefully we approach our user experience in a consistent way. But you want to consider what happens if someone types in, well, if in this case, like, I don't know, it might be one of those areas where we would just first pop the question in someone's face, say yes, no, like they do Meshery CTL system reset. Now this is, it's a factory, it's a, you know, it's a reset to factory defaults thing. That's exactly what this behavior here is. I bet you more often than not, when you go to do that in a piece of software, it usually says, are you sure? Like, I'm about to wipe out your configuration, like just to confirm you're sure you want to do that, right? So we might do well to present people with just a quick yes, no, like this will reset you to factory defaults. Are you sure your stuff will be lost? Could be. This might be a nice UX addition. And make no mistake that even though it's a command line interface, it's a user experience. It's an alternative to Meshery UI, which is clearly a user experience. Both are clients. The UI and the CTL are both clients. So Husseina, I guess there's a call out to you to try to make Navendu's life hard. See if you can break anything in there.
So do we have the list of supported releases somewhere that we can have it as a list? If the input is matching to that list, we would pick it up from there. Otherwise, we would pick it up from stable or some default path should be defined. And also it would be good to echo back what we are trying to do, right? Are you sure after that? So
nice. I'm taking meeting minutes since no one else is writing this down. So that was to confirm, ask for confirmation.
Yeah, that seems a good idea, but like, yeah, the current error handling is like if we fail to fetch a Docker file, then it will just output an error saying failed to download uh, Docker Compose file from the URL. So that's the error handling we have now.
so there is no fallback,
But
like a default Docker config file.
currently there is not.
Okay,
There
we
is
are
not a
not
file.
maintaining. Yeah.
I think like currently like it will keep it as it is. Yeah, I'll just yeah. Yeah, should we go for like a default Docker Compose file if that specific version doesn't exist, or
Yeah,
like?
sorry, I didn't hear that. I wasn't paying attention. Anirudh was like he isn't either. The answer is that it's actually over time the Docker Compose file that we have. So I'll explain it real quick, but before I do, let's put a link to where this is actually written down, which is that over time the Docker Compose file, it begins that there's a template config.yaml that gets baked into Meshery CTL itself. Over time, Meshery CTL will reference less and less of what's in the compose file, and more it will reference what's in config.yaml. What the heck's the difference between the compose file and config.yaml, you ask? Great question. We'll put a link to, it's in that is such a great question. It's inside of this doc. Anirudh, if you have a link to this doc, feel free to point people to it. There's a number of FAQs in there that speak to that. Yeah, there is a default. We're working toward a default Docker Compose. I mean, there is a default Docker Compose in GitHub. And then even more than that, we're auto generating that Docker Compose file each and every time that someone is running a command. So yeah, hit up Anirudh in Slack if what I said doesn't make a lot of sense. And if what's written in the CLI and documentation doesn't make sense either. I guess Anirudh's not on the call.
He is actually,
He
or
was.
he was about a second ago.
Cool. Well, nice. Thank you, Navendu.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I'll contact Anirudh again. Until I do, Dhruv or Abhishek, do you want to take the next topic?
Oh, okay. If it's my turn, is it me or Pranav? I didn't get it.
You, Dhruv. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So currently I'm having a dependency issue, so I won't be able to show what I've been working on. So, uh, yeah, probably that. If you want to talk about that, we could talk about it after everyone else is completed.
Nice. Yeah, maybe just a description of the work, like kind of the area that you're working on.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
All right. Abhishek.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just start with showing the extension point that we've come up for the Golang plugins on the Meshery server. Let me just share my screen. All right. Is my screen visible?
It is.
Yep, it is.
Oh, great. All right. So it was my recent PR that I chipped in Meshery, which is to introduce an extension point on the Golang backend server that Meshery runs, which can load up plugins during runtime, so that we can develop different plugins to implement independent functionalities. So, so the recent, uh, I can show it in the code. That's much better. So first, I'll show how it works actually. So I had designed a sample plugin that prints out a message called initialized whenever it's been loaded up, and I have my Meshery server running as a local build, and I'm running the Meshery remote provider as well as a local build. So when you boot up Meshery, yeah, so it looks something like this, and if so to in order to initialize the plugin in here, the API that you'll have to hit is API/provider/extension, which would initialize your plugin in Meshery, and the plugin is basically uh, loaded up from a remote place, and it's persisted back in the file system, and it will be located in your home folder Meshery provider. Yeah, this is the path where your plugins would be loaded in, and to see where your Golang plugins are placed. So I had created a sample plugin which is GraphQL based, and I had created a shared object over that, and now to load in that in Meshery server, what I had done is, one second. Yeah. So I had created an extension point which has two functions. One is to load up the package, and by default, any plugin. Uh, I can show you the sample plugin that I created. It's in here. So any plugin would have a run function, which would implement an input parameter of of type extension input, and output of type extension output. And these are the definition of these two are defined in Meshery itself. Um, inside, yeah, yeah. So right now the extension input feeds in the database handler that Meshery uses. It gives, basically it shares the database handler to the plugin so that the plugin can do operations with Meshery's database. And the extension output here gives a router, which is a HTTP based router. And this can be used to extend functionalities of the Meshery API itself. Uh, so, so this is basically the extension definition. And so this particular function loads up the whole extension package in here, and then the extension plugin in here, and the handler would serve the plugin, as an if the router reverts with a with a HTTP handler to extend its capability, this handler would enable that. And yeah, that's pretty much how this has been implemented. So yeah, so until now, is there any questions? I guess no one has one. All right. Uh, yeah. So Lee, do you want me to discuss about GraphQL extensions as well, like towards GraphQL, the work we have done?
I think that'd be helpful. I don't know that a lot of people have seen it.
Yeah, sure. So what we are trying to do is to run a GraphQL server alongside Meshery's API server. And in order to do that, we've implemented a GraphQL plugin. Basically, the plugin would be loaded real time in the Meshery server, and it would serve different endpoints in here. So right now, if you look at this code, basically what we're doing here is that we wrote some sample resolvers. Uh, Resolvers are nothing but functions that perform actions for every API call or query in case of GraphQL. And so for every query, we have all the resolvers in place. Now now the GraphQL server itself is implemented over a TCP socket. So it returns a HTTP based handler, uh, or rather it implements the HTTP interface of the the native HTTP package. So what we're doing is that we're getting the GraphQL handler, which is this particular portion, and we are passing we are giving that giving that as an output of output to the where did it go output to the Meshery server as a HTTP handler. It's inside extensions, I guess. Yeah, so this particular interface, uh, this basically GraphQL handler implements this interface. So we are just passing the GraphQL handler as this particular value, and then to extend whatever the endpoints that GraphQL is going to serve. We are just dealing with that in this particular function, which is the extension handler, which records the extended endpoints according to the loaded plugins inside. So basically, if you want to do any queries on GraphQL server, you can directly call the Meshery's API, and that will internally route it to the GraphQL server. Yeah, so that's pretty much the work that's been done. Any questions, anybody? Right. Yeah, I guess that's it from my side.
Oh, thank you, Anand. Thank you, Abhishek. Good. So, by the way, if people didn't quite get what Abhishek was showing, which I suspect since people didn't ask questions, that's totally fine and makes sense that you might not get it. Can anyone do me a favor? Does anyone who think that they understood what he was referring to, could you try to explain it to reinforce your own understanding and then help everyone else understand at the same time? And by anyone, yes, I mean you. So the topic was extensibility, and it's kind of a big old deal for Meshery. Well, or I should say it like this: that it's a big old deal in terms of like how much effort it takes to try to make the project extensible. It's a fantasy of maybe mine and maybe some others here that Meshery becomes a well-used project, and part of what will help make this project or many others well used is to give people some freedom, some room to differentiate. And by people, I mean either individuals or other organizations to come in and say, hey, this is a useful tool. I'd like to extend it. I'd like to, I like the logo in the upper left-hand corner. It's the prettiest logo I've ever seen, but I'd rather put mine there. I'd like to augment and change the way that this thing works. And people they can go in and remove the Meshery logo. I don't know why they ever would. Like that thing's just, but and put in something else, and that's fine. Like that would be, in many respects, that would be great. Like that's not the thing that we would encourage the most, but it would be great because they're finding value in the project and they're using it and they want to share it with others. And maybe they're a consultancy and they want to. I'm just giving a random example of people making a change. Anyway, point is, at some point, maybe we should say, hey, a lot of people kind of want to do that. Maybe we should make it such that when the next release comes out, the new logo, the Meshery logo, doesn't overwrite their change. Like, it'd be kind of nice. That way they don't have to. So maybe we should be conscientious about where people can extend the tool. Maybe that, and it's a fine balance. Like up front, it's like, hey, no one really cares about extensibility if the tool doesn't do interesting things. If it's not like, novel and really helping people get something done, then who cares about extensibility? Nobody's using the tool. So hey, once the tool is really interesting, let's make sure that we're encouraging other organizations and individuals to invest their time to augment the tool to do things that they want to do. People right now, there's a number of areas of extensibility. We support 3 different load generators, by the way, but there are many more than 3 load generators in the world. They work differently. Someone might want to insert a different load generator than what is supported directly in the project. Well, good. There have been considerations made for that. There's an interface behind which people can extend and insert a different load generator. As a matter of fact, we have talked about this a little bit in the past. Rather than me blubbering on for a little bit more, I'll try to wrap up my description and leave you with a visual diagram of the fact that Meshery and its architecture has become a bit littered with extension points. Extension points are here in yellow. Whoa. And so Abhishek was just more or less showing that there are, in this upcoming release, we will have made, there have been extension points that the project has supported in the past. The most notable and sort of intuitive extension point that has been supported to date is adapters. There's a lot of adapters out there, and that's a point of extensibility. Someone can write another adapter. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at some individuals on this call who've written new adapters, and people on the call who've totally rewrote the entire framework of the way that adapters work. Good, that's nice, because, you know, hey, guess what? There's going to be another service mesh announced soon, so it's coming. And I'll tell you, come hit me up if you want to know what it is. What am I trying to, extension point. So he's just showing an extension point, which is that, you know, with the Meshery supports will support GraphQL as an interface through which you can query the database that's sitting here, the database in Meshery server. But the queries that ship with Meshery, they might have what you need, or they might not be quite the queries that you had wanted. Maybe you want to bring some of your own. Go ahead, and when you do, when you upgrade to v0.6.0, your queries won't be overwritten because you'll have put them inside of the safe zone, inside of the extension point. And so in some, you know, another way of articulating this is that, oh my gosh, another way of articulating this is that well, we've got like a bunch of more contracts happening. A lot of times you'll think of an API as being, you know, as something of a contract with users. This is how you can programmatically interface with Meshery or with the softwares through an API. Sometimes that's, you know, that's a REST-based thing. Sometimes it's a SQL-based thing. Sometimes it's anything can be an API. It's what makes an API is anyway, that's a discussion for another time, but one of those characteristics is an implicit contract. So in some respects, we just littered our project with a bunch of contracts. Oh no, that means that we're gonna have to move more slowly and adhere to all of these contracts. I'm like, well, I don't think so, because I say we spent a long darn time on a number of these extension points. They're pretty neat, they work pretty well, and they're dynamic. These are different than you're going to find in any other project okay, not every single project. Kubernetes is maybe the only one that does some similar things like this, where it's really dynamic. You can start to run Meshery, and after you're running it, you can augment it on the fly with and change its behavior by injecting new code that Meshery didn't know about before it started. Pretty cool. Takes some effort.
Lee, I'll interrupt here. Anirudh is on the call. He could probably pick up his topic now.
Okay, thanks. No, we're gonna skip it. We've covered it right already. And so back to what I was saying is that, yep, that's pretty neat. So that's what Abhishek was talking about with GraphQL resolvers and the ability to dynamically inject Go code on the fly. Cool. Dhruv, quickly, or actually it's not Dhruv, Utkarsh, I think you're up. Any other questions for Abhishek before Utkarsh goes? Cool. There's a lot of extensibility docs. We'll put a link to the docs. Most of them have been published. Utkarsh, do you want to talk to folks about patterns?
Should I share my screen?
If you would. And people will definitely need context here because this is a new concept.
Yeah. And I hope it's visible. It is visible, right?
Okay, so we've been actually trying to create another construct in Meshery. By construct, I mean basically now you can give Meshery, you'd be able to give Meshery a particular file, a YAML file, which we call pattern. Uh, this is nothing but a kind of you're mentioning that these are the services that you want to deploy. This looks very much similar to Docker Compose. So you are mentioning in here that hey, the pattern, basically what this should be called is STSM. It's random. You can call it anything. And the services that you want to be deployed are STO, and that is and type is service mesh. And you also want some add-ons to that particular service mesh. That is the type is service mesh add-on. Variant is Grafana. You also mentioned depends on. So this is like the configuration of your entire deployment that you want to have. What Meshery would do behind the scenes is that it will take this thing and it will convert this pattern into multiple OEM components. Ryan Zhang was here on the call. He explained really well what OEM is, so I won't go in depth what OEM is all about. But what Meshery Server would internally do is it will convert this pattern into OEM components, OEM application component and OEM application configuration, and it will also apply certain other kind of policies onto it. So for example, here I'm mentioning that hey, this Grafana service, this depends on Istio, but well, Meshery. The Meshery would implement some best practices onto it. That is, it will say, okay, you are saying that Grafana, variant Grafana depends on Istio, but I know that it should also, I mean, it or not that you would be deploying Grafana before Prometheus, but Meshery would enforce that. So it will add another dependency to your deployment because Meshery is smart. I mean, it will figure it out. So it will make sure that Grafana it gets deployed only after Prometheus gets deployed. So right now, I mean, because it's still in testing stage, so there is no UI for it. The end result would be that you'd be able to access this thing from Meshery CTL as well as from Meshery UI. Meshery UI would obviously have a UI, I mean, all the UI extensibility to support those things, and Meshery CTL would basically support to basically run a command like Meshery CTL deploy -f this particular file. Right now, what I have on my system is this endpoint. This endpoint is actually what is responsible for, which will be like handling this particular file behind the scenes. So if I send a request, I'm sending this particular file to Meshery server, and here are the logs. So I mean, I have enabled the logs, not that you'd be getting all this stuff. So you can see that it figured out, okay, Istio does not have any dependency, so it will deploy Istio first. Then it will, this is nothing but topological sort. So then it will, you can see here Grafana, the dependency for Grafana number 2. I mean, the number of dependency for Grafana 2, although you mentioned that dependency for Grafana is 1, but Meshery basically figured it out and said, okay, although you mentioned only one dependency, I'm going to inject another dependency, and that is the reason that Grafana would be deployed the last. I think this is a previous state of my mesh of my Kubernetes cluster, but now we would see. I hope everything is up. So everything is up in Istio system namespace. Grafana, Istio, I mean, Istio Ingress, Istio Ingress, all of the other components. It internally also Meshery server would internally also figure out that what a Meshery adapter should be used because we have a lot of adapters. It will figure out based on the variants that we are giving in here. So yeah, that's it. I mean, although the basic concept is that you'd be giving it a pattern file, but the power that you'd be getting is that Meshery server would be figuring out a lot of smart things for you. Right now, what what I demoed was that it figured out automatically that Grafana should be deployed after Prometheus, but there would be a lot of other best practices that Meshery server would be enforcing on your patterns file. That's it for me. Any questions?
Yeah. Where did you find the time to do this? Oh, this is what the hell? I thought we were just like talking about this. This is amazing. Oh, you can. So okay. I'm having to digest. Wow. So can you Yeah, by the way, I have this question, but actually my question is probably less important than others. So let me stop and ask if others have questions about what's happening here.
I have a question on the model specific. Basically, if the service mesh add-on is depending on multiple parents, then what happens if one of them is deleted?
One one of them is deleted in sense I could
Uh,
understand. Yeah.
let's say right now it's depending on STO,
Mhm.
but if I say that if I have two blocks, STO and Linkerd, and then
Mhm.
Grafana depends on both, then how does it deal with it? Like if I get rid of STO, let's say for example, then how will it deal with the add-on?
If I mean if the dependency does not exist, then the deployment will fail. I mean, it will not, because we have explicitly marked the dependency that this particular service will have a dependency on SU, and if any of the dependency would fail, then the deployment for that particular service will also fail. And right now, what I have like in the code, we can toggle this behavior, toggle in the sense that we can even give not that we have that query parameter in here right now, but we can toggle that behavior. Right now, what would happen if any of the deployment of basically any services deploy, if any services deployment would fail, entire deployment will basically fail.
No, no, no.
So yeah, yeah,
So if Grafana depends on STO and Linkerd,
yeah.
and if I delete only STO, then
Yeah,
will the
that's what I'm
Grafana?
saying. If the dependencies if the requirements doesn't fulfill, then it will then the deployment for that particular service will skip. And because the behavior right now is that if one deployment fails, then all of them will fail. So basically, what I'm trying to say is then all of that you mentioned, this particular pattern, all of the deployment will kind of fail, just
Okay,
because one of the dependencies was not being resolved.
got it. Yeah, okay.
And
Yeah, so we have a couple minutes. I'm gonna recap this area as a well for myself and for everyone else to just get some context. And in part because it's quite likely that we might end up speaking about this a lot more. And so the concept here is that well, folks like Michael Gefeller, who's on the call, and Utkarsh, and any of you that want to participate here that you can, but there's been a few folks who've been thinking about this area. And this is, the area is about patterns and about allowing people to use Meshery to exercise a pattern. And by pattern, in this case, what we mean is it's sort of like a feature that's commonly used that you use a service mesh to perform, like a thing that you do with a service mesh. And there's a lot of things that you do with a service mesh. Sometimes it's just looking at metrics. How much traffic is going across my services? And there's a pattern in there about how people use those metrics. You'll hear people espouse, principles of methodologies around monitoring the P99. Anyway, without getting into specifics, the ways in which people will look at metrics, there's a pattern by which there's like a best practice, basically a pattern, best practice, kind of synonymous. An architectural pattern, if you will, an architectural best practice. And so there's a bunch of things that you can do with the service mesh. You can redirect traffic in a coordinated way to facilitate the release of a new service. For example, you might do a canary. So you might do a blue-green test or a red-blue test or a purple neon orange test, which is to say that you might have two versions of the same service. Let's say that there's like Gmail next generation, and they're changing their interface, and they want to test out that interface on some beta users. Some people signed up. Well, they have a list of beta users. You sign in, you authenticate, you get a JWT, you get a token when you authenticate. You send in your request from your web browser to pull up Gmail. It says, oh, that person, that token that's being presented, they are on, the service mesh will look at that and say, oh, that person is on the beta list. We should send them, redirect their traffic to the beta interface. Great. How many people should we sign up, and how many times should we send them over to the beta interface? Maybe depends upon things like how long, I'm sorry, how many errors they're receiving. There's a pattern here. There's a best practice for what to do. And to distill all of that best practice, all of that pattern into YAML is in many respects what Utkarsh is sort of exploring here and trying to articulate and do. Well, if you're going to redirect traffic, you might want to have metrics from Prometheus, like on line 22, about that traffic. Well, what metrics? Well, maybe there's a particular Prometheus configuration that you need. The pattern here isn't necessarily intending to try to capture configuration of all of the things, but configuration of those things most pertinent to a service mesh. And so you need a model, you need a way in which you would write down that YAML into a model. We've had Ryan Zhang of the Open Application Model project, OAM, on this call late last year, presenting on an application model. And we've looked at it a little bit. And so Utkarsh is just doing some early prototypes of leveraging part of what that model is and trying to apply it to the domain space of service meshes. Ultimately, we would like to be able to espouse to the, tell the world that here's 60 practice patterns, 70, 80, I'm not sure how many there will be. There will be variants. They'll be more likely, they'll just be, some certain set of patterns, 50, so to speak, maybe, but variants of each one. And we want, for part of what Meshery's overarching goal is to make service meshes palatable, easier to use, easier to understand. No better way than to just be able to take a pattern and say, yeah, I'd like to do that, and tweak it slightly in some easy to read YAML in this pattern and apply it. So that's the context, that's the goal. All right. Hey, there's a couple of things we didn't get to cover today entirely. So there's a lot of work going on in Meshery CTL system context. Anirudh has been sort of headlong focused in this area. So he's the great individual to go see about the work that's going on there. There's a lot. It's very exciting. It's funny because on one hand, it's so simple, yet it's so confusing. It's a very interesting place to get into. So do see Anirudh, this area of patterns, clearly like this was sort of the tip of the iceberg of like a bunch of discussions and thinking and design that needs to happen. And so we'll be doing that. We'll get Utkarsh, if there's a design spec or anything, if there's a place to point people to where you've written down anything about the work, point them there. If not, let's go make a new doc.
Yeah, I'll be making a new doc.
Nice, good deal. I know Michu has been thinking about this. I know he's going to want to get his hands dirty. And then the extent, anyway, I can't wait to get this. It's going to take us a little while to get the release out. What an amazing thing it will be. Hard to concisely articulate how much is in there. And yet, what's really sort of frustrating for me personally is, in the end, Meshery, other than MeshSync, Meshery won't be doing that from an end user perspective, won't be doing that much differently or much more for the end user. kind of frustrating because it's so much better. What a major release this is. But we've yet to take full advantage of those architectural components just yet. So the work on the patterns, that will be predicated upon that there's a really good framework for adapters now that can be used to deliver something like a pattern. A visual topology mesh map, it's only possible to do something like that with mesh sync, which is coming in this release. So this release, when I articulate it like that, it makes sense that it's not a 1.0, that we're not there yet. All right, I ran us over time. Anything else from anyone else real briefly? Boy, yeah. IstioCon, CFP ended yesterday. We tossed in something. I want you to know that anyone that hangs out here long enough, you're in danger of being put on stage. So it just comes with it. This community works a little bit differently. You do get called out on these calls. That's because like me, you're here to grow and learn things. And the way that you do it is by being uncomfortable. That's no pain, no gain. I think that's anyway. All right, I could ramble on forever. Very nice to talk to you all. Good to see you, Miku, on the webcam. The guy's got more wisdom flowing out of his chin than I can, Okay. See you guys tomorrow on the newcomers call. See you for the community call on Friday. Bye all.
Hi everyone.
Goodbye. Same
Bye
time next
all.
week.
Bye everyone.